Well, as we heard earlier, North Korea has fired 2 cruise missiles towards the sea off its west coast. And this comes as South Korean President Yoon Suk marks 100 days in office, and also a day after the country commenced preliminary drills with the U.S. Well, for some analysis on this, we're now joined by Lim Tai Wei, Adjunct Senior Research Fellow at the National University of Singapore's East Asia Institute. Tai Wei, thank you so much for joining us. Well, President Yoon has once again emphasized his expectations on North Korea, that it's not a political change, but rather it's diplomacy and sustainable peace. Do you think that his comments today would make any difference to the inter-Korean ties?
Well, certainly there will be some differences or impacts that will be made because during the election campaigning, he portrayed himself to be a very tough person that will come down hard on his North Korean policy. But the latest speech indicates that there is some form of olive branch that is offered to North Korea as long as they give up the nuclear programs and go through denuclearization. He promised, quote and unquote, in his own words, audacious economic packages if this happens. And these packages will include foreign direct investments, infrastructure building, and other economic goodies should the North Korean decide to give up the program. So I think this opens the opportunity for a more positive atmospherics for the two Koreas to have a more dialogue and creating a positive atmosphere is very important, especially in Northeast Asian culture, which is a high context culture. It's based a lot on symbolisms.
Well, picking up on the point that you mentioned about the audacious economic assistance package, basically it was offered to North Korea in hopes of convincing it to abandon its nuclear weapons program. But there's been no response so far from North Korea, and Pyongyang fired 2 cruise missiles just today. Do you think it is trying to send a message through its actions?
Well, this is perhaps nothing new because if you look at the statistics, the North has fired around 30 missiles this year. And perhaps it is much more of a operating procedure that they have when it comes to expressing their emphasis on the inter-Korean ties. So President Yoon has reached out for dialogue with Pyongyang in this sense. So any dialogue he feels should not be a political show, but should contribute to establishing substantive peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I think the ball is very much on the Pyongyang's court to see if they would take up the offer. But at the meantime, South Korea will continue their preparations for the drills and also what they feel would be within their national interest and agenda in managing the missile launches and the reactions to any heightened, provocations that may occur in the future or the coming months. But at the meantime, the olive branch is released and out there. So the ball is on the Pyongyang's court to see how they will respond to the president's speech.
Well, Tai Wei, let's also speak about South Korea's relation with Japan. Mr. Yoon has vowed to solve wartime labor issues without annoying Japan. Do you think that ties between both nations, South Korea and Japan, will improve?
Well, I think the desire to have better relations this time emanates from both sides. It appears that based on the envoys that have been sent to Tokyo, and also the positive vibes that were released by the top leaders of both countries, there is a chance that both countries can come together and perhaps reach some kind of a consensus or agreement to ratchet down the tensions. Even tuning down temperatures since the previous administration would already by itself be an achievement. There are plans to create private public sector groups that can discuss sensitive issues that have been unresolved since the last administration. The top leaders on both sides appear to be rather positive in reaching some kind of progress. It doesn't have to be an ambitious progress. It could be a symbolic ratcheting down of temperatures since the tensions in the past few years. This is perhaps essential, particularly for the trilateral alliance that the two countries have with the US in face of multiple challenges that the region appears to be confronting.
Yeah, picking up on that point on trilateral relations, we are seeing the formation of Chips for Alliance, and South Korea is still making up its mind whether to be part of this, but Mr. Yoon has agreed to participate in the preliminary meetings itself. What impact do you think South Korea's decision will be in terms of joining the Chips for Alliance?
The impact will be very substantial because Korea's Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix are actually powerhouses in chip making, particularly since they are the top two memory chip makers in the world. And so the participation of South Korea being the third largest chip maker in the world will be very crucial for the Chips 4 to succeed. This is a process which is known at least from the US side as a friend-shoring, to be able to increase coordination across borders between partners, business partners, and also South Korea has announced putting greater investments in the US, particularly through the company of Samsung, increasing it in places like Texas. So I think this will probably be a very big impact given the ranking of South Korea within the global chip making industry. And perhaps in the next 2 years, we will also see some developments in IPEF as well, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, which also places chip making supply chains as one of its priorities for discussion in the coming months.
Well, thank you very much for your insights. That was Lim Tai Wei, Adjunct Senior Research Fellow at National University of Singapore's East Asia Institute.